Hi, it's Carrie from Classic Cottage Art and Antiques in Bowling Green, Virginia, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Creating at Classic Cottage. Today, we're going to give this vintage trunk a makeover with Dixie Belle Paint Products. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, hit the subscribe button below. And if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. So come on, let's get started with today's project. So this trunk came from an estate, and it was in a state. No, it was in a really bad shape, and it's been refurbished to a degree. I envision it to be a coffee table, but I don't really care for the current finish on it. Most of this is original finish to it, but let me tell you what I've done up to this point to get it to where I'm going to paint it today. First of all, as usual, I cleaned it with Dixie Belle White Lightning Cleaner. I mixed it up as per directions, and I put it in a spray bottle. Then I scrubbed it with a scrubby, like a Scotch-Brite pad. I think that's my normal steps I take. Then once I do that, I rinse all of the white lightning off of it because I didn't want any residue on here to prevent my paint from sticking. Okay, that's step one. Step two, this guy was a smeller. I mean, it just stunk. And it doesn't smell at all now. Sorry, I had to check. I haven't checked lately. It had been in an environment, been years and years full of possibly water damage or just moisture. So what happened was I did everything I could think of. Of course, I cleaned the inside very, very well with white lightning. Because it had some other issues, it needed to be disinfected. I actually disinfected it with Clorox, with Lysol, not at the same time. But it was disinfected. Still was smelly. So what I did was I set it in the sun in like 90-degree days for days and days. It smelled great when I got it in the house. Put the lid on it for a while, and it still smelled not so great. I put charcoal in it for a long time. That sometimes will absorb the smell. Some, but not all. And I'm thinking I even did the vinegar trick where you washed it out with vinegar. Baking soda for sure. And so I exhausted everything that I could possibly think of to get rid of this. What I ended up doing was I had my husband replace the bottom. Flip it up here for you. This is a brand new bottom. He replaced all three of these support bars and the bottom. He ended up having to take off all the hardware, and he saved it, of course, and he replaced the bottom with brand new plywood. That really, really helped the smell. But the rest of it still had absorbed some of it. I painted these so they would be more close to the original with Dixie Belle Coffee Bean. So that helped with the smell a lot, a lot. But then it still had some smell, so I decided it's a job for Boss. Dixie Belle Boss stands for blocks odors, which is what we're working on here for odor, stains, and stops bleed through. I wanted this for the odors. So what I ended up doing was I bossed the whole inside of this. As you might can tell, this is new wood here. But I bossed it before the new wood was put on here because I wanted to make sure that the odor was sealed in before the new wood was placed on top. Had I done the boss after the new wood was placed on top, I wasn't 100% sure it would block all the odors. This also was new wood. The way they created these was when they nailed this part on, they nailed it all the way through and bent the nails over. This had a little more of the sharp edges showing through. So I had my husband, while he was cutting a bottom, he cut a new top for me. So if someone wanted to put blankets or something in here, it wouldn't snag them. He also had to replace the wood around this area here. And when he removed the handles, the leather handles were already missing, and the pieces that held them were a very thin, brittle metal, so he took those off. I'm in the process of looking for handles now, but I kind of like it just like this. But when he took it off, there were holes inside of this wood. So he made a clever little wood piece, beveled the edges, so it looks nice. And I painted this also with the coffee bean paint. Great. Now you'll notice too, somewhere. Like these screws here, they're not the same color as the other ones. That's okay, I'm gonna paint over it anyway, so I wasn't too worried about that. Front here, this is not original to the piece. This little decoration here. This is actually a product called Would You Bend, and I don't currently carry it in the store, but I have access to it. This package came like this, and this one was way too big, but it just kind of seemed to work on the same lines as I was going for. Painted this also with the coffee bean paint. This is easy to apply, just some wood glue, let it sit, good to go. But this whole area here was open, the lock had been removed. You'll also notice there are no latches here. That's because one was missing, and this is going to be an inexpensive flip. I didn't want to put a whole lot of money into this because it can get very pricey by the time you start replacing all these parts and pieces. It gets pretty pricey. So I have twofold reason. One, I wanted to save money, and two, I wanted to make sure that if a child were to have jumped in here, they could get out. I didn't want to have a chance of it locking accidentally. I'm not going to paint the inside, but I will tell you the boss did its job. It does not smell anymore, and it is great. I also bossed the whole outside. Now there's two reasons for that. Reason number one is it's going to help keep the smell from coming on either side. So it sealed the smell in from this side and from the inside. But I'm going to use the color Fluff on this, and I didn't want to take a chance of it bleeding through with this old dark wood that when I cleaned it, it kept coming off brown on my paper towel when I wiped it clean, which indicates to me that that is distinctly a bleeder. So we don't want that. So let's get started painting. This is dried for some time now, and I am going to do a dry brush technique over the entire piece. I'm going to start with the color Fluff, but if you know me, it may have more colors in it besides just Fluff. But let's just see what we're going to do here. I'm going to be using these, I call them Chippy Chip brushes. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get most of the hairs out of them because I hate brush hairs in my finished paint. Okay. All right, this is just a 2-inch Chippy Chip brush from the hardware store. Nothing special about it. And I'm going to pour my paint in a paper plate just because if in fact it does bleed through, I don't want to get that into my paint because there could be a case where I may need an extra coat of Boss. If it bleeds through, that's no big deal because I use the clear Boss. If it bleeds through after it's painted, I can go back and put another coat of clear Boss on it and we'll be good to go, and then just put more paint and we're good to go. So that was my reasoning for using clear Boss. I'm going to stir my paint here. Make sure it's mixed up really well. Sometimes after it sits a while, it just needs to be mixed up. Shaking's good, but I like to stir my paint as well. And the cool thing about this project, you don't need a whole lot of paint. Again, we're saving money. Like I said, I envision this being used as a coffee table, but you could very well use it for storage. It could be used for a storage coffee table. Now you've seen me dry brush before, really just a little bit of paint, and I'm going to offload on my paper plate because I don't want a ton of paint on this. So you've got way too much. Just a little bit. And I'm okay with it being kind of rustic right here and things. I don't need to fill in the holes because I want the rustic look. Well, let's see what happens. I'm going to actually get off a little bit more. I think that's too much. And I'm going to even go over the metal. I'm going to go over my Would You Bend. It's kind of cool how that brings out the detail in that, isn't it? This little geared Would You Bend really just kind of goes with the whole trunk. I got a little bit heavy there, not a big deal. Now the cool thing is, if I want to, I can go back, and if I get too much in a certain spot, I can sand it back. Not a big deal. Now so far this looks like it was a nightmare, right? So when it's done, it's going to look beautiful. kind of like a farmhouse finish. And I might decide, I'm going to open the top a little bit here so I can make sure I get up under this lip too. And the cool thing about this is it's not going to take long at all. And I kind of want it darker in spots. I don't really want it, you know, uniform all over. If I was going to get it uniform all over, I would actually just paint it, you know, solid, but I'm not going to do that. And the other advantage to this is that it's going to dry really quickly. Let's do up here. Let's see what it looks like over this metal. Not so bad. I don't know. Let's get in these little spokes here. I'm just kind of going to do that. Again, it's not an all over kind of thing. And you can change the direction of your brush strokes if you want to. I really like how it picks up the crackly look in this metal. It's really kind of cool, actually. If I see some places that I think it needs to have a little bit more paint, that's okay. And I'm probably going to do 2 coats just because I just can't leave it alone. I mean, you could just do 1 coat and leave it. And that's like not everybody's taste right here, but not a problem. It's just that simple. I've got the whole front of this done, so that's pretty cool. Now, this is called a dry brush technique because it is a dry brush. This brush is not damp at all other than whatever the paint has caused it to be damp. So you want to make sure your brush is, you're working with a dry brush. A wet brush or a damp brush is not going to be your friend on this technique. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of the trunk and I'll be back. Okay, so this is 1 coat of dry brushing. If you like this really chippy farmhouse kind of looking look, you're done. Slap some either wax or clear coat or gator hide on it and you're done. But you know me, I can't stop here. So I'm going to put a 2nd coat on, and I might even put a little bit of, maybe a little bit of color in it. And I'm thinking maybe some Antebellum blue added in here, just here and there, not everywhere, because I want it to look different. I also have some mermaid tail here, but I'm just going to play with color. And like I said, I really don't want a lot of color, just a hint. I'm just going to use the same brush. And I've gone all the way around, and this is all pretty much dry already. I mean, that's just how quick the dry brush technique is. But let's go ahead and do another coat of the white. So I'm going to go up under here so I can get under the edge. So when it's open, it's painted too. I'm not too worried about closing the lid on this. Now at this point, if you decided you didn't like how this looked, you're in a good place, because you could always at this point start painting it solid if you didn't like it this way. I kind of like it so far, so I'm just going to make it better. Maybe a little more white. I said I can always sand it back if I want to add some more of the brown areas. I have sort of a plan, but I'm kind of making it up as I go along. I might want a little bit more in some areas than others. The other thing is too, if you don't like it, if you want just the supports to be a solid color, you can always go back and do that too. It's just paint. You can design as you go. And I do that a lot. I design as I go. I have a basic idea in my head, and then I change it sometimes halfway through. It starts to have a whole different look, and I change my design. And that's okay, because you're the designer. Starting to look a little better. Now the cool thing is, if I decide to add color and I don't like it, I can go back over it. That's why when I start to do color, I'm going to do it in just sparingly places just to see how it looks. Kind of get behind these locks and kind of up in here. This one's still coming to life as I'm doing it. And I'm already, that's another tip. Step back and look at your work. If you look at it up too close, sometimes you can't visualize how it's going to be finished and where it needs more work. I'm starting to like where this is going. I'm kind of liking the metal, maybe a little darker, a little more opaque, a little more coverage there. I don't know yet. Like I said, I can always sand it back if I don't like it. Let's get in some of these little cracks and crevices here. Okay, let's step back and look, and it's starting to look pretty good. I'm liking it, but as you know, I think it needs some color. Let's try some Antebellum blue before I get too carried away here. I actually am going to take a little bit of this paint off of my brush just so it doesn't mix too much. Now this is on, well, pretty much dry except for the places where I applied it thicker. I'm going to try some of this Antebellum blue first, and I'm talking just a little bit, and I'm probably going to take most of that off. Because what's going to happen is whatever isn't dry, it's going to mix and kind of change the color. Let's hold our breath and start. Now this one I'm going to go maybe in like, I am going to go in straight lines for this. For some reason I just think this color needs straight lines. Oh my goodness, I do like that. But again, I'm using very little paint. I mean, just tiny little bit. And if it's too much, I can always go back over it with the fluff. Oh my goodness, yes, I'm really liking that. And just enough just for some interest. I don't want it to be, you know, I don't want to draw a whole lot of attention to that blue, to the Antebellum. I just want to, I might not even want it on the hardware too much, just on the wood parts. Not overly thrilled with it there, but that's okay. I can go back over that with fluff. I'm not even sure I want to add the mermaid tail now. Let's see what happens. Ooh, that's a little bright. And that literally was like a whisper of paint. I mean, so little, even too much. I mean, just a whisper of paint. Hardly any at all. And this is just kind of, you can, and I'm sure on camera it's going to be hard to pick up, but see here. Now what's going to happen is it's not going to look so good to you maybe, and it might look great to you now, I don't know. But once I'm finished with it, it's going to look fantabulous. And I don't use that word very often, but fantabulous is a word that just seems to fit this right now. As usual, I have to put some kind of color in something. I'm going to keep this now just for my colored brush because I don't want to put it back in my fluff to do the rest of it. But I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I will finish the other sides and come back to you. Okay, here's the back with a second coat of the fluff. And here's what I was talking about. Let's see if you can see it. Let's do this. If I decide I get too much of the fluff there, I can always grab some sandpaper. This is 120 grit. Might be a little much, but that's what I have on hand right this second. And I'm going to gently sand back to take off some of that. I don't want to sand too hard because I don't want to go past the boss. And there, that's a little bit better. It's not quite so thick in one spot. Here's another spot. Just enough to see a little bit of that wood coming through. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the colors on this one too. I don't want to get too much though. And this is already dry. And these I'm going to go, remember, perfectly linear. Because I don't want to make any weird striations. I just kind of want to give it a hint of color. And I think I'm going to stay away from the hardware. I don't particularly like the colors on the hardware. Again, if I don't like that, I can kind of pull it back. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with that later. So not real thrilled with that, but that's okay. I've got a plan. Now, even though this needed a bunch of work before I got to the painting part, the painting isn't taking me all of that long because it is a dry brush and it's going super, super quickly. So what if I get too much right there that I don't like? I could take a paper towel and wipe it back. Sometimes that makes it kind of blurry. I'm just going to leave it alone. And now I'm going to go to my other color, which is the mermaid tail. And this one, seriously, is just a whisper of a color. Oops. It is so little you can barely see it on the brush. It's a little bright, but we're going to take care of that too. Now, if you live in a beach area, hey, this might just be right up your alley. And this, I mean, it's just like a whisper. And this, I'm just not putting a whole lot of this on here because I'm not convinced I like the mermaid tail color. But I got a plan to fix it if I don't like it. Oops, I'm going to step back again. Too much right there. Now at this point, please don't turn off my video because you're thinking, this is one hot mess. If it's actually driving you crazy, this kind of technique drives my husband crazy. He can't stand. He's more of a traditionalist. He likes traditional things. I got to do something with some fun every now and then. All right. Put this down for now. All right, let's put our mermaid tail color on this part. Now this is just a simple technique of layering. I think I'm liking more color. Isn't that crazy? You start out one way, thinking it's going to go one way, and ends up being a whole different creation by the end. A little more color here. Don't worry. Don't worry, I'm going to fix it. That's the best thing too. Start off just a little bit because you can always add more paint. Like I think I like it better up here. These colors, for some reason. You can always add more. It's easier to add more than try to take away what you've got. That's why I always like to layer. I just go around and around and around and I layer. Okay, now if you're ready to take this and turn it off and say, oh my gosh, she just killed that thing. She ruined it. Don't. We're getting to the fun part. Although I do think I need a little bit more of Antebellum blue in this particular one. This side needs a little more Antebellum blue. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. you get to this point and you like it, stop. Let it dry completely. Put wax or a clear coat on it. But I can't stop. So you're to this point and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Don't worry, it's just paint. At this point, you can paint over it. It's no big deal if you don't like it this way. I'm kind of liking it, but I kind of want to do something else too. I like it, but it's reading a little floaty. I like to call it floaty. It's not quite grounded enough for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my white, my fluff. And I don't want to do it here just yet because that's going to just mix the colors funny because it's not 100% dry yet. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit more fluff and kind of just go over it. Because remember, at first I didn't really want a lot of color. I'm liking it with the color, but now I tend to change my mind sometimes. This one I got a little carried away. It's dry now, and so I'm just kind of taking, and I'm going to use the fluff to kind of push some of that color underneath. But I'm going to give it another layer of the fluff. But I'm very super light. Because after all, I kind of wanted to be more shabby chic-y looking. I did get a little carried away with the color, but that's okay. It's also a good lesson on how can I fix it. You know, this is one way to correct it if you decide, I don't like it anymore. Give it another layer of the color that you started with. And here's another thing. You don't have to do it all the way across. I see I got that too much. You don't have to add the color all over, or the white all over, just where you think it needs some more. I'm going to step back again. I don't know if you can tell, but it really toned it back down. And you're saying, now why did you just cover up what you just did? Well, for one thing, I got a little carried away. And I don't think it will appeal to as many people that way. And I'm going to go do that all over. See how green it is here? I'm going to tone it down with some white. This is a good learning experience. You haven't ruined something, you can always fix it. I call it design adjustment. I adjust my designs all the time. Because it's looking good one way and then I'm like, maybe not. But see how it's still, the color is still there because these are strong colors. The Mermaid Tail and the Antebellum Blue, they're really strong colors. So they're going to come through anyway. Now that looks like one hot mess right now. Let me show you what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the Dixie Belle glaze in black. Normally I would clear coat this first, but I want a little bit of dark to come on this. If I don't like it, guess what? I can do it again. And I'm giving it even more dimension. You're like, wait a minute, you're putting the black back on it. Yes, but that's because I want to tone it down even more. And I may not want to do it all over, just in certain areas. Just areas that look like they need to be toned down some. And this is basically, this is not how you would need to do this. I'm showing you ways to fix things if you don't like how they turned out. If you want to like fix something that you think is a hot mess, These are some options on how to do that. It's definitely you don't have to do it. This is the way to fix it. Now the cool thing about this glaze is it is water-based, so you can use the paint right over top of it. No problem. You can always paint over water-based products with water-based products. Now once that's dry, I can go back and dry brush it again because I'm not 100% sure I like all of this. I kind of like the Antebellum blue look, but I don't especially like the mermaid tail look. Hold it. If you think I have just ruined this trunk, keep watching. I changed the plan and it looks super now. So let's go ahead and go over this part with the fluff again. Because I think I want to build a little more coverage on this. Because that was my original vision. This is a good example of you change your mind during the middle of a design and it's no problem. It's a little time consuming, but this way you can always get your project to look just the way you want it to. And I'm putting it on just a tad bit heavier this time because I want to cover up some of this other stuff I've got going on. And it's a case of sometimes you've really got to see it. Another way to do this, you could do a sample board first and see if you like the color combinations. I tend to just do it on the project. And it's dry brush, and I am doing a little bit thicker this time, a little bit heavier. Because I do want to cover up most of the color. And if some of the color still shows through, that's great. But I didn't want it to read that color as prominent. Yes, I think I'm liking that better. But just because I changed my mind, it's no big deal. It's fixable. And remember, this is completely dry now, so it's going to be able, I can paint right over it. The fluff is a really good white for coverage. It's my favorite because it does tend to cover really, really well. See, it's even covering most of that Antebellum blue. So you can see I like this a lot better than this. This is where I was wanting to go to begin with, but I like to experiment. So you get to be along for my experiment. Sometimes I do tend to go back to my original plan, but it's always fun to see what could happen. Now I know, don't do that again. And I also know I can fix it. You don't want to cover it completely. I like some of the wood showing through. That was the whole original thing. This is one of those things you can do. It's your project. You design it however you would like to have it come out. I like to say you're the designer. And again, if I get too much on it, I can actually just sand it back. But already I'm liking this much better. And if that Antebellum blue starts to shine through like there, just let it all dry completely, maybe overnight, and then paint it again. It'll be fine. I even like that crack showing up, so having it brighter right here is actually kind of cool. Kind of shows some of its age. Starting to like this a whole lot better than that. So we're going to go ahead and make the whole trunk look more like that, and then I'll come back with the finished product. Here it is, finished. This is actually my original plan of how I wanted it to look. The white with some of the dark showing through. That was my original plan. As you can tell, I got all of the, now there's a couple of places where the blues are showing through, but that's okay. In my mind, that could be old patina. I don't know. But it looks the same all the way around. Where I had so much color on it, looks way better now. That's a little bit wet. The top looks better now. There's a little bit of blue showing through, but that's okay. I'm okay with that because, like I said, it could be a little bit of the patina. But overall, I am thrilled to pieces with it. I'm not going to paint the inside, I don't think. I may change my mind on that. I just wanted to show you what happens if you change your plan while you're painting your piece. It's not lost. You can fix it just like I did. So I hope you have fun painting your next project. What I'll probably do with this one is I will either, once it's completely dry, I might put clear wax on it just to give it a nice soft sheen, or I might do satin clear coat just to give it a little more protection for a coffee table. So thanks for watching, and I hope you try this technique, or at least you've got some tips on what to do if you change your mind and you think all is lost. Just repaint it. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next video. Bye.